Welcome. Thanks for sharing your Sunday with us, guys. I'm going to just quickly introduce these two gentlemen, and we'll get started. Uh, we'll begin with a discussion with exhibiting artist Evan Halter, your AE show currently in Specificities, and we are happy to welcome John Ryder here today. I'll read his bio. Evan Halter's bio is on press release. It's a little long, and so you read it at your own leisure. Following this talk, we're going to jump right into Kristen Mills' walkthrough in the back galleries. Krista.
Hi.
I guess. Jonathan Ryder is an artist, curator, and writer based in New York. Ryder is the director at Flower Art Foundation, where he has worked since 2014. Previously, he was the assistant curator at Art in General from 2011 to 2014. Ryder received a BA from Pennsylvania State University in 2005 and an MFA from the School of Visual Arts in New York in 2011. His writing has appeared in Art in America. It's the second time with us. We're very grateful for you being here. Thank you, Evan, and for your beautiful show. And
hey, everybody. I've got some questions. I think we'll kind of go down rabbit holes. Also, I think do about some Q&A at the end, but also if anyone has any questions for any clarifications during, please look at a lot of questions for sorry, I'm not always good, so I wrote it down. But we'll just get more. So we've known each other for several years, and there's a certain shorthand that I think we have in the practice. But I think with the show Specificities, I'd be interested to know where this fits into your broader practice. If you think this work is or this body of work is a chapter in there, and how you approach putting these images together for this show. Yeah, I think like a year and a half ago when Ryan asked if I would do a solo show, I told you it's like the first solo show that I've had more than a year to prep. So I really wanted to approach it in like a very intentional way. And so I was thinking about like, I don't know what I would want to focus on, if anything, or like would I want there to be some kind of like narrative or statement or something with the show. And I think what I kept coming back to was that like over the last 8 years since I was in grad school, my work has centered around I guess sort of like repurposing just art historical paintings and kind of manipulating them or like taking them out of their original context. And so the first idea I had for the show was like, okay, I'm gonna look back at some of the artworks in the past that still really resonate with me, or worse that I've like continuously come back to. So the first piece that I kind of like conceived of, and then the first piece that I made is the little painting that's right when you first walk in, the little undercurrent etching. And so that was kind of like the first, step, and that it was like a little bit of a snowball effect of like, I think just kind of thinking about my practice over the last 8 years, kind of not so much thinking about this as like a period in any kind of way, but like, I think it was the first time that I've been able to think about all that time, what I've been making, and then to kind of create something that's like a full body work that makes sense in some kind of way. I do think some really interesting things happened along the way, just like intentional and not intentional, about like, reusing, like just in this room alone, like all 3 of these works are based on the same still life painting that have all been kind of like, it's been pulled apart and like reassembled in various ways. So, well, that's actually okay. So let's pop up from them in particular. So on this wall, you collage. So that's an image that you're taking, cutting, putting together a composition, which then kind of bounces across the room over top us because the painted version of it. And then the tulip and several other flowers then quoted in the piece over here. Yeah. Let's talk about just like the collage first, the attraction of these particular images, the artist first, and then kind of the visual trickery of kind of cutting, layering, collaging. Like, how did we get from A to B? So the whole work in this room is based on a still painting by Barogia's postcard, who this painter that I've been looking at on and off like really since art school. And Dutch Golden Age. Yes, that's and there's one of his paintings, not this painting, but one that's very similar is at the NFA at Boston. It's like, tiny go for yeah, so that again, I was kind of thinking like, okay, I've been interested in still life for a really long time. I want to like use that in the show in some way. And I think like particularly with the collaging is actually very, very new for like me and my practice. And it's been like an interesting, I've been using it more as a tool to like generate ideas for future paintings. And it's been, there's not really like been a consistent way that I've been using the collage. Like this really is one of the only ones that when I made it, like that ended up being the finished product. A lot of the other ones have been cutting out various things, scanning them into ingress. I think this will be going through as well. Yeah, exactly. It's most like this whole painting, like the collage, the finished collage is a combination of scanned in cutouts and then also like digital manipulation. And then I make the painting based on that. But yeah, I thought, I don't know, it was kind of interesting that ended up being like this one kind of standalone sort of like piece. Yeah, and so then I knew that I wanted to make it into a full painting. Yeah, and then I don't know, it's a little bit hard to explain because I do feel like in some ways the process of getting from like here is a little bit like it's become a bit more intuitive, I think, than my work has been in the past, just in the sense of like throwing a bunch of things together digitally, seeing what works, removing things, erasing other things. Sometimes a weird accident will happen where it's like a layer will get taken off and then it's like, oh, that's actually like, that's what it needed to be. So that's been fun and has brought a certain element. I mean, pseudo work is like very tight.
Well, I think it's like been to talk about kind of being painting for the past 8 years, and I think also kind of like looking at Dutch full page painting, which for me is all about exactness, visual trickery, and generally a lot of symbolism also baked into each one of the flowers being some cursor.
Yeah.
Or it could be a bit of a mirror was being reflected in the mirror with the dog in the ground, or everything's a visual tell. And I think to cut paste them, and then in this exacting way, is a really interesting way of looking both at our history and then also use them. I mean, there's a lot of history here when it comes to, I would say, collage, trompe l'oeil, treatment of the eye, but it's also interesting to kind of see these fractions of paintings over here, because they're also hinting to the fact that they also are paintings. I think so many of those got stylized as, and I forget the names of certain artists, but there were not only just artists who were looking at kind of trompe l'oeil or the attitude kind of in the nature of painting, but there were also then artists who were painting the batten paintings. Or this thing is one with, I think that has little walnuts kind of behind broken shoe plaques.
Yes. Yeah.
And they kind of hint the fact that like it's 3D object in space. And I think it's, if you look at the top of the painting over here, whatever line kind of diagonally cuts the composition, then also goes around the side of the painting and it's tapped in. So there's an acknowledgement that this is an edit. Totally. I think there's the acknowledgement and all of these things. Yeah, you're not looking necessarily at landscape painting with a window into, the outside world.
Yeah.
You're looking at construction.
Yeah.
But I would say it's also like talk about take your relationship to negative space in each one of these pieces. I mean, the concentration of information in the details and flowers is kind of exacting, beautiful. But whether it's canvas, raw canvas, or the illusion of raw canvas, or whether it's the paper, like talk about like how you balance compositions between active, fully depicted spaces and their collage.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think part of that comes from just not like in undergrad, I was really interested in minimalism and like went through like a very interesting phase of being obsessed with like the lane space movement. It had like Vitarelle and Irwin and those guys. I think there's something about that like as far as a sort of like haptic experiential thing, or like the art like has the capacity to do that. And so I think I try to bring that into painting in a way that like is maybe like confusing. Like that's something about James Turrell's work that I find like so interesting, is that it's like it's this illusion that is created like through very practical, like almost scientific means. But then there is also this like mystery to it. So yeah, anyway, I think
But also, how did you make the jump from like the Vitarelle, light and space, experiential, to 17th century?
that's still idea. That was sort of like, yeah, before, like in between undergrad and grad school, I went through this weird phase of kind of like cutting out all imagery from my work. It was like, I was really very interested in raw roulette, and like it was kind of like scaling everything back to basically nothing, to just like making the viewer aware of their like of the act of perceiving anything. But like I got to a certain point, I was like following that trail through when I got to grad school, but then it was like it started feeling like there was something missing within that. At least for me, like I didn't feel, even just like in the process of making the work, I felt sort of like I missed the like labor of actually making the thing. And so it was like this weird combination of that, and then one of the classes that I was in, we were reading this book about still life painting called Looking at the Overlooked, which is all kind of like just like a re-looking on still life and its place in art history. Yeah,
Because also in that conversation, it's kind of like still life, genre painting. It's not considered necessarily as serious as like street painting or portraiture, or
it's always been kind of relegated to the art, like domestic art. Yeah, exactly, like domestic cinemas and things like that. Yeah, and there was one artist in particular, Kwan Sanchez, whose work like really stood out to me, and it was his work was like this really interesting combination of like geometry, in these like really like hyper realistic spaces, but then like the backgrounds were black, so it was like this like real and not real at the same time. There's just something really striking about that to me, and I couldn't figure out a way like to incorporate it in my work in like in any kind of subtle way. So I just started copying portions of his paintings just to like try to understand like what about them I found so interesting, and like because it was like I could not stop thinking about that. And that actually was kind of like that was like the first domino in like, and then it kind of that also snowballed into like just kind of starting to look through art history and like picking out certain elements of things that I found really interesting, like moments of like her work flatness and depth are kind of contradicting each other, just like something I've always found really interested in painting.
with some of the course in this space, also just like as a fascinating experiment of kind of looking back at her history and then kind of reading it through your own hand. Are there certain artists, and I would say the difference is the door that we see in the other room is a rebath table that they wrap or a blue block print.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a gesture that's being replicated, but it's also the process of making an image which is being replicated as painted.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like Roche's, or we pretty much like a Dyke for or Rudder, are there certain artists that you really like painting like if there's certain like people that you found that you was kind of like, this is really enjoyable to replicate?
Yeah, I mean, Durer is probably my favorite. There's something about like replicating the wood block or the etchings that's like not funny in any kind of like haha way, but like I just think it's really funny to like make a painting of a print.
Sure.
because it like seems kind of useless or like a weird like why which that so definitely that Cornelius Geisberg is another one who he also was an artist who like made a few paintings where it's just back of the painting, this very kind of like tongue-in-cheek trompe l'oeil kind of thing. Yeah, I would say, and I mean I've replicated 2 Vermeer paintings, and those have always been are kind of not surprising, but like those, I think I've learned the most about painting, like technically, from trying to replicate.
And the show could be really gay and all.
Well, yeah. And mostly just because like there are almost no hard edges in any of this work. Everything is diffused, all of like these are so much easier to paint because everything is so clean and like delineated, and I can like see exactly what it is. With Vermeer, it's like I don't understand, like, you know, it's hard to see where like this reflection fades into this other part of the reflection, or like in the background there are just so many subtle shifts. So yeah, those are Vermeer, certainly the most difficult, but yeah, always maybe the most rewarding, because then I can like I found that I can take whatever I learned from those and like bring that to other paintings that I'm trying to replicate. Like, oh, I can use like this technique here, and like that helps. And yeah, so I think I've become like faster and a better taker from that.
Any child books?
Not easily haircut.
Because they also, yeah, it's like in this room, it's kind of a hall of mirrors between, you know, starting in the source imagery, replicating it, quoting it, blowing it up, turning it around. And I wonder, it's kind of like how, like there's the interest in terms of like being in the studio, looking at the source material, challenging yourself to make the piece. But I also wonder, how much do you want the audience to know or come in with certain type of, I mean, I think, like, how much do you want an audience to bring to that?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm titling the work, I want the title to bring at least like some kind of element that is maybe not so explicit in the work. But I'm also like very much not a writer, and like I don't write about the work by making it. It's like, it really, this is something that's always been very difficult, and like language is not really a part of making that, which is why mechanics. But yeah, titling is like not always the easiest. Like for some of them, it's like I'll finish it, be like, oh, like that's like with this one, it's like I knew that like it's based on a bouquet painting, and I kind of felt that like the way that it's arranged is like, I don't know, almost a sort of vase type of thing. So I'm like, oh, this is like a reinterpretation of a bouquet.
Okay.
Some of the other ones are a little more complicated just because like there are more elements happening, or there's like, you know, the references seem kind of like fucking coherent, but like almost at odds with each other. So it's like there's like multiple ideas within the painting, and I also don't want the titles to be like a full sentence, or you know what I mean. So if like I try and find some kind of happy medium, and sometimes the titles end up being very literal, kind of like this one is just called cut through, because it's like, you know, most of what's happening within the painting are these elements of things being cut and pasted on top, and then kind of seeing through all of the layers at the same time.
What was also interesting about thinking about trompe l'oeil, it's like it's sculpture of the eye. So I think also like the idea of like trickery can also be playful, and I think there's a certain level of playfulness in the work. Because also in coming up painting and seeing either the hints of shadows or the hints of paper that are still cut around that didn't reference something else, they are, I don't want to say a puzzle, but I think there's something kind of just like a visual puzzle in terms of just the idea that from across the room, your eye thinks it's seeing something that's out.
For sure.
And there's something playful in the idea of the cutouts, or I think kind of, again, the idea of that painting being bisected by a cord that then goes around the side. And I think you were saying before, like it's not lack out fun, but it is pretty playful. And I think when the work has such a, I would say, strict attention to detail, I think you need that playfulness. So also be the Trojan horse, which I think welcomes people in to kind of look around the pieces.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they feel like they're, like butterflies in their glass.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting because we call like butterfly wing grand next scout. So like talk about like, and also I would say, I think he talked about how long a painting takes to a day. But I think there's some best time that goes into this, which can also kind of balance out kind of like, I don't know, like a slapstick humor. Like I think there's like an intention in VR.
Yeah, and I think like in some ways, what you're talking about is like kind of mirrored in the like negative space and positive space, where it's like I want there to be some kind of balance. And I think with the playfulness and the trompe l'oeil and everything, like I love trompe l'oeil. I do think that there's like, once you like see the work, you experience it, and then your brain recognizes it as a painting, it's like that's kind of the end in a lot of ways. Like obviously you can still like admire it, check exactly. Yeah, it's like, oh, it did the thing. But I like when I'm making my own work, I want there to be almost no resolution, or like I don't want there to be like an fight in terms of like thinking about work or experiencing it. So yeah, I really want there to be these kind of intentional contradictions where it's like there's like a deep commitment to trompe l'oeil, and then I'm like actively working against that at the same time. Yes, I don't know. I think it helps. I don't know. It's just like something that I think that I need in the work in order to like spend as much time or do making it, so that it doesn't feel so like deadly serious all the time. Yeah.
And then also in the middle smallest gallery, it's a series 3 lithographs. When were those made? And what's your relationship to also then like the process of making multiples? Because like most of the paintings are one of one.
Yeah.
Even if they're all related.
Sure.
For lithography, I mean, this is a process of making multiples.
Yes.
So what are those images exactly? And then they're both across many Korea.
Those are from 2018. I had a show in Cincinnati at Clay Street Press, which is like a gallery that has a food shop attached. And while during the show, the person who organized it asked if I would be interested in doing an edition of prints, which I had never done before. So they're seeing clay etchings. And that was like definitely an interesting experience. I really enjoyed like etching them. And they're based on the work that I was making at the time, which was these kind of like threshold paintings is what I was calling them, where I was using the same window like format in each of them, and then kind of altering what was set inside of the space. So yeah, it was kind of just like a variation on that. And the string that, like the kind of different string variations that are inside of those were also included in paintings that I had. So they're kind of like echoes of paintings I have already made. And I think like I didn't actually run the grits up that I had no experience actually doing that, so I was there and like watched the whole process, which I found very interesting. But and then Ryan asked if I'd be interested in including them in this show, and I was a little apprehensive, but then kind of looking at everything together, and then there's this painting that has the painted string, and then there's painting in the far back, the Blumbo. There's that one too. But there's one in the very back gallery that has like the cut paper there's like a grid of string and tom. And that's also kind of like, again, a sort of echo of that idea. Which is like, just, I get like my interest in geometry at like gridding things or like creating a grid. So yeah, I actually feel like it was kind of, and I haven't shown the prints since 2018, so it kind of felt like a nice, kind of like I was talking about before, like last 8 years of like kind of, yeah, just like the trajectory of my work and like recognizing how like some things have changed, but then, yeah, like the string, continuing to use the string without even really thinking about how it relates to like passive work. So I don't know, it's kind of like a nice little, yeah, almost like a little pause like within the show that's like a little bit different, but still related type things.
And you said you did a year organized this exhibition.
He was like maybe about a year and a half.
Okay. What are, I would say, what are the pleasures of having a long runway? You have to put together an exhibition, and then what are not so much? She's a planner.
I mean, certainly the advantage of that, at least your view, is like, yeah, each painting takes usually 2 to 3 months, depending on how much detail is within the work.
And are you working multiple paintings up? But
Okay, yeah, okay. Like, usually like 3 or 4 at the same time. Just the different drawing times and accounting for all of that. Yeah, I mean, I think having that long really did allow me to like start with, 2 or 3 paintings, and then like ideas kind of generated from there. So, it kind of like built on itself. And then
we were in the studio, I'm thinking like maybe 6 months ago. I don't know if that was everything. Nothing was. I think there might have been only one stage that was finished.
yeah, that sounds great.
But so many of the works were already sketched out.
Yeah.
Going into the process of making an exhibition like this, and how many people, like, are we talking like a dozen pieces in the show?
There are, I think, 10 paintings.
10 pages, yeah, or else.
Yeah.
And the collage. How much is planned initially? Is it making kind of all the collages, all the maquettes, writing those images, and then spending the rest of the time kind of making? How much room is there for kind of invention and discovery? Because I think also there's a certain kind of crispness to the work. And I think also with the title of the show come with like specificities. There's like an intentionality. So I'm interested in terms of like how much is sketched out, how much is planned, and also like how much does life have in the way, and it's also like change stages of the process.
For sure. Yeah, I do. I mean, again, I kind of wanted to like, obviously, like I know how long it would take, so I knew that I needed to have as much sketched out and prepped before as possible. But the last piece that I like finished the sketch for is the one that's just in this room, Province. I think I finished the sketch for that one in maybe February or March of this year. When like I had started the first painting June of 3-piece here. So it definitely was kind of like I had 3 or 4 sketches already finished that I knew I wanted to start. Like this one in particular was pretty early. And in terms of like discovery, yeah, I think that the use of the moth is something that kind of emerged through creating the work. Like, especially like, there's a moth in all 3 of these. And then there's the moth waves happening in some of the other ones. And it was almost this thing where I didn't even really recognize that I had like used the same moth multiple times. And then when I did, I was like, oh, that's sort of weird and interesting. And then I started thinking about how to incorporate that in different ways. So that there's the moth painting like with the moth at the bottom that has like the cutout moth invert at the top. And that one actually is probably that one feels the freshest and newest for me, because the only art historical reference in that one is the like there's an oral shell, which is again from this painting. Yeah, so I do think that like things, as the fall got rolling, like things started opening up a little bit more, and I was seeing different ways of like breaking away from my tendency of like very rigid geometric structures within the paintings, like using the kind of like more of a serpentine line in ways. Yeah, so I don't know. Like I was kind of trying to like toe the line of like making sure that I had enough time to finish everything and being very structured with like still being open to things evolving and changing. Yeah.
I think what's also interesting is I've made exhibitions for 15 years, and I'm not. This is like a weird example, but it's like we're in a gallery right now. It's not where the work is made. It's not where the work will go. It also will then seem together again. So like, what's the experience of kind of putting all of these objects in the space for you, having kind of like, because the studio's not there into this room.
No.
So it's like, what's kind of the feeling right now of Shoko as a suit?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've kind of put this out in the world, and also like you were talking before, like you're also not making a pound.
Right.
So like, so what is like, what's going on in your mind around show?
Mm-hmm.
Like the practice.
Mm-hmm.
I like this chapter of work.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's been sort of interesting. I think it also is like because I don't live in Hudson and I can't like come visit like super often, and it has felt a little bit almost like it's not happening. You put very much it on you to say then like it's not real. But yeah, it's been an interesting cause. Like like I was saying before, I have like not really been able to like get in the studio or think about anything new right now, which is I would just fine. Like I'm not
Feel like a healthy distance.
Yeah, I think it's sad. I've gone through burnout before, and it's not fun. So I'm like trying to do myself space to but yeah, I'm already kind of like recognizing, just kind of like flipping through books and things and recognizing things that are like pulling my attention that are different than it's like looking a little bit more at like close-up images of landscape as opposed to so I mean it's still this very like flat shallow image space. It's not so it's not just so it's not like oh I'm gonna make like the church paint or something, but it's been interesting. And I think in some ways when the show is finished, it will feel sort of like a period, and I'm sort of curious to see where like how the work will change, or what like looking back at this show, like what are things that I'm interested in, what are things that like are new that I want to keep pursuing, or things that feel finished, so I kind of want to keep, but that's still that. Yeah.
I think like in the spirit of openness, this happens.
That's a good moment to continue on, like, will them all continue. Well, you said it opened up on that piece and all that. What's the show in the offer?
Yeah, there are actually 2 paintings that are in my studio that I wasn't able to finish after this show that have elements of like the moth so it definitely will still
So it's still in
it's still there, yeah, but in terms of like new paintings that will happen post show, I don't really know, Brad. It's hard to tell. I mean, I know the work has this like facade of like being so structured and I kind of figured out, but like it really, the process of getting to the final image has become like pretty intuitive.
And I think you also said in the studio that also like doing those mock wings and those like pools of color also allowed you to like do an abstract painting.
Yeah, inside of it. Exactly. Yeah. That's definitely something that I'm like finding myself gravitating a little more, like kind of swinging things a little bit more towards the kind of like not like gestural abstraction, because I don't know that that's like quite within the structure of how I make work, but at least being influenced by like Leslie Vance is a painter that I really love, and but she also used like her work is also like very structured and uses trompe l'oeil in like some not so dissimilar ways to show up what I'm doing. So, but also balance the negative space. Totally. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in areas that like totally flat color.
Well, I had a comment and a question, or I was thinking about the physicality of the work because like there's this trompe l'oeil effect, but then also there's the revealing of the canvas. So there's actually this like, I know you were talking about being interested in the space between like the object and the image, and I think that like there is something that, well, there's kind of this like imaginary layering that brings us in, and then also there's the like you're also revealing the layering. So there's really like there's such a physical quality to the paint itself, which I just find like incredibly compelling in that space. But my question is, and then maybe you can speak a little bit to that. But I was interested in how you think about scale, because you were talking about like the this painting being like the original really tiny, and there's not like, I think also there's not this consistency of like, okay, I'm always drawing them off this big, but it's like being blown up and condensed, and so I just was wondering if you could talk about how you can decide make those decisions.
Yeah. I mean, just to speak on the texture and like layering of all of that. I don't even know if that was like what I set out to do necessarily, but I think like being interested in these like trompe l'oeil paintings where it's like the back of the painting, I thought like I'm like using the texture of the canvas and like the painting as a whole to create the composition, or to like the negative space kind of adding to the composition. And I think just through the process of like 30 kind of make these paintings and like using tape and masking things off and cutting them, there are like things that happen where like the tape creates a little bit of a lip where like raises the surface of the painting a little bit, which isn't something that I even like thought was going to be a part of it, but it does add this like it adds this element of like, is this adhered on to the painting, or like how is this being constructed? Which is something that I sort of like, that I like, and kind of adds to that trompe l'oeil effect. But in terms of scale, I have certain ratios of like that I like to use, and it's kind of just a matter of like scaling them up or down depending on like, just really depending on the individual painting and what I think will feel right, I guess, is kind of feel. There's not really like there aren't really any rules to that either.
But also physical scale. I don't do the lithographs obviously because they're like replicatable. Is any canvas the same size in the show, or is every canvas?
Yes, there are. Yeah, they do repeat. There's like 18 by 24 is a scale that I use pretty frequently. The two bigger ones are both 48 by 42 and a half. So like when there gives a scale like that, I do replicate that scale because I like that. I do think that repetition like that can be helpful, just in terms of like the work kind of interact with each other. But yeah, sometimes like it just really depends, or like sometimes I'll have a sketch for a painting and I'm not sure what scale, and I'll just like tape on the wall different scales to like see what feel like, because I'm again kind of relating to the like flight and space movement. I'm interested in how a painting will feel with it like in a space, and what feels like the most appropriate scale for that composition.
Yeah, I love the way like so like you're working off of like actual paintings that have a certain scale, but then it's like we see the flowers that are almost like life scale. I just really like that shift viewing. Yeah, thanks.
I'm sort of curious. I had a similar question on scale, but it was more related to an idea of resolution, and how even in terms of finish, but like actual quality of image. And I didn't realize when I view the show, I thought so much was like you make the collage, you make painting. Sometimes there's some like invention. I didn't realize there was a digital aspect. And I feel like that almost reinforces some of the things I was thinking about in terms of resolution, like how much can things get scaled up before you're really like traversing this tightrope of replication versus invention. I'm like, you're talking about the mirror. I was like, oh, well, what the scale, like the threshold of scale that I don't move up to before we're in this like blur completion. And like, do you think about that when it's like how when you landed on the source or a portion, you've done an excerpt. Does that come into play with the scale question?
For sure. Yeah, definitely. The Revere one in particular was like fairly challenging just because of that. Like that portion of his painting is probably half the scale of mine. Yeah, so it's like how do I stretch these like specific things so that it doesn't like become or actually it's more like how do I manipulate the paint in a way that like it reads the way it's supposed to, even at a larger scale. And same thing with this, the whole still life, used in this painting really is like it's about 8 by 11 inches. Yeah, the flowers are very, very tiny. Yeah, so it's definitely a challenge. And I think that's like certainly one of the harder things to figure out is like how do I replicate these like in a faithful way, but also at the same time, like how do I make this my own painting, or like how do I bring this into life so that it works within the whole painting, kind of even separate from the original source.
Yeah, a question as far as I don't know if you're bias or per se, but there's a certain amount of cutting with the collage and with this piece. So I'm wondering what your idea is regarding the kind of fracturing, perhaps, especially maybe visible in I do there. Is there a kind of fracturing of nature or fracturing of what we see? I guess what I'm asking is emotionally, what kinds of issues are, aside from formal issues, are you considering as you go through making this work? Hey. Huh? Or not?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know that there's like a particular like kind of emotion that I'm necessarily interested in. I mean, not to say that I'm like only interested in formalism. I mean, I think part of my interest in still life and the way that I make the work is like I'm very interested in slowness and like in intentionality and kind of bringing this like a hyper focus to things that are maybe overlooked. So I think I don't know, like I guess I don't particularly think of it as fracturing. I think of it as kind of like more dissecting and then kind of like trying to understand better, or like what happens if I like recontextualize these things.
Yeah, but also I like the idea to like take like a momentary gesture like a rip or a tear and then spending 3 months to make. So so there's opposite there as well.
For sure. But I think there's also like it for me that feels like a very like pointed attention. Again, kind of like with the etching, where like it almost feels like this thing that like doesn't deserve like or like doesn't need to exist or doesn't need to happen. It's like like why like the internal drop shadow within this torn thing took the longest of anything, or it's like the most difficult part of this painting to make, but it kind of sits in the back. Yeah. So I don't know if that really answers the question. Good. I think we have one more, but that will get to 2 more, as many more.
I had a 2-part question. I was curious about your ratios, and I was hoping you could describe more about what makes a good ratio you like. And the second thing, given that the paintings are in the same space for a short limited amount of time, I keep going back and forth and trying to trace the various shapes that I'm looking at and see if they match up. And I'm looking at that wedge that goes across the red flower and piece next to you, and I'm wondering, is that the same wedge we're seeing over there but rotated? And I was hoping you could walk up through some of the other shapes that are in there. And
No, that's the exact same shape.
Okay.
Just kind of like twisted and and they recurrence.
Blades of grass above, is that, or
Yeah, so I mean, I think, so the moth at the top of here is the same moth that's at the top of this painting. Like here, it's been detached from the tulip, and yeah, I mean that's maybe really the only thing that's this is actually like a different tulip in that stalagmite than the one that's there. So I tried I wanted to use different elements from within. Like the original stalagmite, it's like a huge bouquet of like many flowers. So I wanted to kind of like extract all of them, separate them, and like create different compositions.
I really like the feeling of being kind of bewildered, not knowing if it's the same or not. You're not going back and forth.
Yeah. And then in terms of like reusing certain things, so like the cut up shape that everything's kind of set into, I reuse or repurpose that same kind of silhouette in the Vermeer painting. There's like a raised surface, and it's the exact same shape, which I thought was kind of like a fun echo because it's the same size, same format panel. Obviously, a completely different painting, different idea, but I thought just in terms of like tying things together within the show, like having these kind of like, yeah.
That's why like they did that, like those Dutch flower paintings were combining flowers that couldn't possibly bloom at the same time. So I like it like hundreds of years later, like those same configurations of things that wouldn't make sense in the same place. Or still regional, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And then in terms of like scale and ratio, it's something that I feel like I'm always kind of trying to figure out like what feels best. And I feel like I've gone from working like there's painting in the very far back room that's it's 38 by 34, which is like a very square rectangle. And for a while, we were like working within that, and that felt sort of good because I was using these kind of creating techniques. So it felt appropriate to have something that was like a little bit taller than a square, but like the grid still works.
A very square rectangle is a nice style or something.
That's true. They're very specific. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. I think it's kind of always shifting a little bit. Like I said, it kind of also just depends on like the composition. Like sometimes I'll be working within, the like 48 by 42 and a half. And then, it's like I'm working in the composition, it feels too wide. So then I'll kind of like shrink it. So it is like, again, it's not always so cut and dry in terms of what the finished painting will be.
So I'm gonna insert a little context before my question, but understanding sort of the span of your work from the show and for, a lot of what's happening in this space, we talk a lot about these cutouts. I'm noticing a lot of canvas, white space, black space. We mentioned the prints before that you've entitled Threshold, and you have other prints that you've referenced as thresholds before. And to me, a lot of it really is referencing the liminal and things that are sort of in between spaces. And I'm curious about your relationship to or your interest in sort of the liminal spaces in between and why that seems to be sort of a base point for your work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that I believe in the sort of like liminal space or I grew up religious. I feel like my relationship with like religion and spirituality is kind of always changing. But I do think that like something that I try to be aware of all the time is that like even if you're like experiencing or perceiving or like having some kind of interaction, that there's always like some element that is unknown, or mysterious, or like I don't know. And so I think it's kind of I don't know, just like in life in general, there's always like these areas of like contradiction or two things being true at the same time. And I think that is something that like I'm able to bring that into the work in these places where it's like the hyper realism trompe mixed with like you being sort of confronted with the flashes of the canvas. Like, it's not that either of those things, they don't exist separate from each other and they don't cancel each other out. They kind of tend to like coexist. So I do think that is something that kind of runs through a lot of the work, is like, yeah, kind of being caught in between two things at the same time. But like, that's not bad, you know? And it's like, there isn't really, again, I'm not interested in like a resolution or like there being like, and this is what this painting's about, or like, you know, yeah, I want there to be this kind of like, yeah, I don't know, unknown kind of nebulous thing about them that can just exist.
Can you one Paul? Dinner. I've known him a while now. We work together. I've been in the studio a lot, and as a non-painter, I'm kind of looking around. I'm like, well, how does one just learn how we paint like every old master? Like, I've not seen a sketchbook. I've not seen studies. So are this like you're going right onto these works, and you're just like, are you making these discoveries as you go, or are there, you know, were there years of study we don't know about somewhere where you were making hoffies? Because that's often how people learn, sure, right? So did you see the able to just do it? So I'm curious. So lots of studio assistants. Okay, yeah. What I would think. So I know I haven't seen it, so I'm wondering, like, that's a question. Yeah, I mean, I've answered to a lot of triple what's seen the show. It's like, well, how is he doing it? And are they, for instance, are they like, what are they stuck on? And so that sort of is interesting to me. Is it just a gift? I mean, that's the fair answer. Like, you're just able to do it.
I mean, I think like, I mean, I've been drawing since I like can remember. So it's something that I do think is like, it did come naturally to me. And like, you know, I've been in art classes, again, like as far back as I can remember. But in terms of like figuring out how to paint like this, it was like very much trial and error in grad school. Kind of like, I knew I wanted to start replicating these paintings. I mean, the first ones were bad. Yeah, I'm really bad. Partly just because, like, you know, I didn't really, I mean, I learned like technical painting in undergrad, but I did not care about it at all. I was like, I did not want to do that. I was like, very focused in abstraction, geometric abstraction. Like, that was kind of the focus. So then when I was in grad school, I was like, wow, yeah, I really should have like maybe learned a little bit more. But so it really was kind of just like, I knew that that's where the work was moving, and I wanted to like, and I knew that like, if I'm going to be copying from here, like I have to be able to do it in a way that is like believable. Not even that I'm like trying to like rival them in any way, but I'm like, and if I'm going to be copying these people, like it has to be as good as I can and respect can get. Yeah, exactly. Because in a lot of ways, yeah, these are sort of like homages to, to like these great art historical painters. Yeah, I don't know. It's just been very much trial and error. Like, but also like, and then kind of, you know, there's YouTube videos that can blow. Culturally, yeah, like there are high school, you're studying something. There's ways to, yeah. And I will say that like growing up, most of what I did was just like, I would copy, I don't know, like, you know, I loved cartoons as a kid, so I just would like copy things, like print things out and just copy. So I do think in some ways, like doing that for such a long time, almost like primed me to copy these like, you know, in digital images of these paintings that some I'd never seen before. Yeah. Yeah. And just knowing that like, I mean, I think like to give myself a little bit of credit, I am like a very patient person when it comes to making the work. So it's like, and that is required in order to break them the way that they are. Like these cannot happen, you know, in a couple of weeks. It's like months so later, you know. Well, I never again. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for coming then. Yeah.